Hello, everybody. Welcome to Fancy Coffee Friday. We have our fancy beverages right here. We're at Summer Moon Coffee. We love Summer Moon. She's beautiful. She's wonderful. Thank you, Summer Moon, for not knowing that we are going live on social media upstairs in your balcony. Okay, so I have Alan with me today. Alan was our music director / director for You're Gonna Love Tomorrow, and then he's our music director for Susical. Basically, Alan does all the things, and we love Alan. We're like, look, oh, we can see comments. Oh, that's kind of nice. Oh, that's fancy. Okay, this is my first time using Restream, so like, here we are. Hopefully we're live on social media. I think we are. Good team. All right, so I'm basically going to go through a bunch of questions with Alan, and we're going to talk about what the role of a music director is in a musical theater production. So let's get into it. So Alan, can you describe the main responsibilities of a music director?
Yes, so as you might think, the music director is the director of the music, responsible for all things on that instrumental, vocal, the sound that you hear from your orchestra and your performers. There's a little mix of that. There is some technical stuff that can go on. A lot of modern Broadway shows like to incorporate a lot of sound technology, a lot of audio mixing. And also, too, it's worth mentioning that the role of the music director is actually going to be very different depending on what level and what production level you're at. In a professional Broadway situation, your music director is very much an admin job. They are managing all of the details around it, coordinating with the major production team. Your performance team and your teaching instruction team are going to be different people. So you're going to have things like your music assistants and your music supervisors who are going to be responsible backstage for getting all the sheet music in order for the band, for the publishing to the singers as well. You're going to have your conductor or your piano conductor who's going to be actually in the pit leading your performances when you have a live orchestra. And then you would also have a whole supervision team that involves musical choices, helping work with the composer if it's a new work, or arrangements if you're doing a revival. So that role that we see in a lot of like more local and more lower production, even regional theater for music director, is kind of an amalgamation of all of the above.
Yeah.
So you see a lot of pianist music directors who are conducting from the pit, who are also teaching the score to the singers, who are coordinating the timing, the conducting, and then the creative vision along with the director. But in higher levels of production, that's often separated between various people because things are moving so fast, you just need the extra help and the extra hands.
Yeah. So essentially, like at a community theater level, like the music director is literally doing the most because like there's so much that goes into it that like at a higher level, you're going to have more help with that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you have, a 15-piece orchestra that you're orchestrating for, trying to coordinate that, you're making daily changes during rehearsal or previews. Like one person just can't handle all of that.
Honestly, that makes perfect sense because it's like that's so much, and like even just thinking about like the amount that you do in like a community theater production, just like trying to like think about amping that up is just like it's a lot. Like there's just so much that goes into it, and like I've seen Alan, I've seen you do your work, and like you do the most, like all the time. Like Alan is like helping everybody like make sure that they have their notes, making sure the harmonies are right. And then behind the scenes, making the cuts to the music, making sure everybody has the music, making sure just like all of the logistics in terms of like music and like the sound that is existing in the show is like perfect. Well, I guess perfection is not attainable.
We get it pretty close.
Yeah.
And I will say, you notice the difference in certain bands and certain music directors. If your band is tight, you know that conductor has worked hard. If that orchestration is solid, you know that the orchestrator and the music director have worked really well together, along with the composer, to get that all together. You know if your ensemble is crisp and on point, that the music director and the conductor and the vocal director have all done their jobs. Like it's something you can tell whether the work has been done or not. All you have to do is open your ears to it.
Like I honestly think we've all of us that are in the performing arts have been in those situations where like you have an amazing music director and therefore the show is absolutely amazing because like all the music is like super crispy and like I don't know, that's the word that comes to my head.
I like that.
Like,
I like
right?
crispy, yeah. Yeah, and it's important to remember that in musical theater, the music is the core of the production.
Yeah.
It's the reason you're doing that and not a play.
Yeah.
It's also the reason that you're doing that and not an opera because you've decided to integrate some dialogue, spoken scenes, the mix of dance and the contemporary themes as opposed to opera, which is focusing on just a classical music score performance and voice on top of it.
Do you know how many songs you are working on in Susical right now?
The track count in that show, I believe, is like 35, and that's excluding the A, B, C, D tracks. And that's just to help split up longer scenes.
Yeah.
So that show is almost entirely sung through. So yeah, music director and the whole vocal cast is busy the whole time.
There's like a handful of dialogue, but it's literally like dialogue that is happening while music is being played underneath of it to lead into a song.
Correct. I think there are only, if I could count them on one hand, the number of times the music stops for the cast to have a scene with dialogue. It's so crazy how much music goes into the show.
Sisicle's wild. I love Sisicle. I'm so excited for it. Okay, let me get my next question up for you because that was awesome. So, okay, I like this one. So, what's the process like working with actors who may not have strong musical backgrounds?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, because
So
we get a lot of those in community theater who are like, I'm an actor, I want to come in and do this for the first time. I haven't had voice lessons. I don't know how to read music. Like, how do we work with those people?
yeah, absolutely. So I think the first thing to keep in mind is that we want to set up everybody for success, no matter what level you're at, right? So understanding what your level is so important to being able to get started on the right foot. We don't necessarily want to take somebody who isn't very musically literate or hasn't sung very much and put them in a very demanding lead role. Because it just doesn't help them succeed. It doesn't help the production succeed. It doesn't help the actor succeed. So the first thing we want to do is be honest about, okay, well, where are you with this? Maybe you're an incredibly talented singer who doesn't read music. That is a different level you can work with. There's certainly plenty of things that one can do that way. We just have to keep in mind, is this one where reading music is going to be critical? And the way you know that is whether or not the musical complexity is high. I think of shows like Les Miserables that are very popular, but not musically complex. You can get a lot of people involved in a show like that who are strong singers who don't necessarily read music.
Yeah, that's fair.
Because there's a lot of stuff you can just hear and get the idea of. And you don't have to worry too hard about following a score. Unless, if you're looking at something, for example, like Ragtime, you're going to have a lot harder time because the musical complexity is a lot higher. There's a lot more to know in order to successfully follow along.
There's like tight harmonies and stuff that happen too. Like I think the shows that have really tight harmonies are going to be the ones that are harder for the people that are not music readers. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Because those are like you kind of have to understand how your part fits within that chord. And if it's hard for you to read the music and hard for you to see where your part fits in, it's going to be harder to learn that, and it's going to take a little bit longer. It's not to be said that it can't be done.
Correct.
But it's just going to take a little bit longer. And so I think as a music director, we have to decide, do we have the time to invest in working on that during the show? Or do we need to pick someone who's already going to come in being like, yeah, I know exactly where my part fits and this is easy.
Correct. And Seussical is a great example of this because there are two trio groups in the show, the Bird Girls and the Wickersham Brothers.
Yeah.
So you have your female trio, which is very exposed, 3-part harmony, very rarely singing in unison. And then the Wickersham Brothers, which do a very similar thing. So those things, it requires you to be able to fit into your part. And some people can do this effortlessly without reading music. They just know how to hear their part and lock into it and know how it relates to others. Yeah. And some people will hear another part and they'll say, that's where I should be, because they want to feel part of the ensemble. And it's a little trickier to try to find that skill.
Yeah.
Right. And so what's cool about those roles, though, is that the Wickersham Brothers appear on stage vocally a lot less than the Bird Girls. So I was able to look at that and say, okay, we have an opportunity for some really strong female singers who can sing harmony to be successful there. And then we have an opportunity for some male singers who maybe haven't done as much harmony to have 2 challenges in the show that we can work towards.
Yeah.
So I was able to prioritize, hey, what is going to be the best for their success by saying, okay, where are my advanced women who can really hold this harmony? And where are my men who have the ear and just need to learn how to do it? So that really gave me 2 levels of, okay, we can kind of fit the puzzle together by knowing what level you're at and what the role asks for.
That's awesome.
And then when you get in there, you can go ahead and just work on your communication of, okay, does this person read music? Can I use certain terminology? Do I have to just rely on imagery that is not musically intellectual, right? Yeah. Things so that I can still communicate the idea without worrying about getting people lost.
That's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, and I'll relate it to dog training, not to think that anyone's a dog, but like, you don't want to see when you're trying to train your dog to do something, you don't want them to fail all the time.
Yeah,
you want them to have successes so that they learn, hey, there's a good thing coming, and they get primed to look for that good thing and act in accordance with that. So we want to set up everybody in the cast to find that good thing, to find that successful moment, so that they can be primed and go, okay, how do I find more successes? What can I do to meet the challenge of this role instead of feeling like I'm constantly blocked and not able to get there?
I really like that. I think Alan was thinking about dog training because we brought my dog to Birchwood the other day, and my sweet puppy has some, she doesn't like other puppies. And we had another puppy at Birchwood. And so we were working on training my dog outside and just kind of like walking her back and forth like in front of the other dog. And so then like, I could go on a whole tangent about that, but moral of the story, we talked a lot about dog training because we love our puppies.
Yes, we do love our dogs. My Archie needs the same thing.
Right?
Yeah.
You know, we need to just like go unpack. We should go unpack once.
Oh, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway, tangent over. Can you talk a little bit about how during the audition process for Seussical, you worked to find those singers that are going to be good in those parts that have those tight harmonies?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So something I did for everyone who walked into the audition room was I just gave them a collection of lines to hear me play at the piano and sing right back to me. What I wanted to know was how quickly do my singers hear new melodies or harmonies and get those into their ear and are able to turn them back around into the sung part.
Yeah.
So I had a collection of 4, which ranged from relatively simple to very complex.
It's so hard.
I mean, I literally chose one that was 8 notes long. And the reason I chose 8 notes is because I knew that the human short-term memory span can hold about 7 objects at a time. So I deliberately chose something that would push the boundaries. And that was one where I knew that a lot of people were going to fail at. So we were talking about trying to set up for success. I wanted to push the boundary on the audition to see who could meet the challenge.
For sure.
So that we had, okay, here's our most advanced, the people who looked at this 8-note, crazy tight, really weird to hear line, and were able to spit it back. And I had 2 singers in the room who did an incredible.
Nice.
Yeah.
And I will say, I have really, really good like oral skills. Like you're trained to always be the person that like got every single one of those. The first time you played that 8-note passage, I was like, hold up, Ellen, what is? Can you just one more time? Let me listen to that again.
And that's funny because that was exactly the reaction of every single person in the room when I played it was, I need that one more time.
Yeah.
Which is the correct reaction because they were able to assess, hey, this is hard.
Yeah.
There's parts that I'm missing. I don't know where to start. Let me hear that one more time.
Yeah. Oh, 100%.
And it was so good for me to understand, okay, these people are trying because they know they don't quite have it and they're asking for it again.
Yeah.
And so that already told me something about the person right there in that moment. And then the 2 who nailed it, I went, okay, you're my highest scores because I don't know if I would have been able to do that in an audition room. And then from there, it kind of says, okay, who was able to at least get close? How did the other ones go? And so I was able to kind of get a quick ranking. Who are my harmonizers? And who are the people who are going to need more time to get those things.
Yeah.
So that's when I was able to say, okay, these people are set up for success to harmonize in the heavy stuff. These people are set up for success to harmonize in the less heavy stuff. And then here are the people who will really benefit having an ensemble around them so that their part will always be available to them with some other singers.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was able to take that information into callbacks and say, okay, we need to figure out how they do in a real world application. Because hearing some notes played on piano is one thing, but having a score in your hand, having a context, having the rhythm going by in your accompaniment, and being able to hear what your other singers are doing and hold your part is a whole different ball game. So I actually found that some of the people who performed relatively well found a new challenge when they got into, well, here's your part and here's everything else going on around you.
Yeah.
So that was me taking the moment to say, okay, what is it like to work on these parts with these people, to help give them ideas, to help them land their part, help them hear what's going on, and how do they work on that process? So we were able to work with some people who initially struggled and ended up and that told me, okay, you're someone who is adaptable, will learn in time, and is willing to put in the work. So then the question just became, okay, if I have these tight trios, how is the best voicing for these going to work? Something that a lot of people who maybe don't spend a lot of time in choir or a cappella don't understand is that your sound actually is going to be different when you're standing next to someone else's sound.
Yeah.
And so how people are standing next to each other, what part they're singing relative to each other makes a big difference. So I was able to take a group of 6 or I think it was 6 ladies, 9 ladies for the Bird Girls that were called back.
Something like that. They were like, it was a good chunk.
It was a
of
good
them.
chunk, right? And I was just rotating people
Yeah.
around like a shuffling cup game
Yeah.
until
It was,
suddenly
though.
some of these combinations produced very different and blending
Oh, yeah.
sounds. And sometimes two voices are just not meant to sing next to each other.
No,
No
yeah.
fault of the individuals, but
No.
certain tone colors just literally, it's scientific. They just don't line up.
Yeah.
So they don't quite blend. They don't quite match.
Yeah.
And so finding who that perfect partner is
Yeah.
to sing alongside is an art within itself.
Yeah, it is.
And I love taking that moment because when we think of theater, we think, okay, here's the best actor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Or when we think of dance shows, here's the best dancer. And so I really like finding those opportunities to really milk the music and make the music have an opportunity to shine the way it should.
Yeah, 100%.
So that is one way that I can approach that in my job and say, okay, how can we help you set up for success? What can I do to be part of that success?
Mhm.
And how do we make it affect the success of the whole, right?
Yeah.
When you get on that stage and you're rehearsed, you're ready, you know your part, you blend with your other singers, the audience can just take in that experience and go, this is exciting.
Yeah, I love that. And I think one thing that was really cool that you just said was it's literally scientific. So like when you go into like, you're always going in thinking, oh, am I going to be the best for this part? Am I, like, I really want the lead. I really want this. I really want to do that. But sometimes it comes down to literal science. Literally, like, does the sound of the timbre of my voice fit with the timbre of the other person's voice? Or does their voice fit with the timbre of that person's voice? And so it literally just comes down to pure science.
Pure science and a lot of luck.
Yeah.
Sometimes showing up is all you can do.
Oh, yeah.
The rest of it, no control over.
Oh, yeah, 100%. I will equate a little bit to, so I had a Disney callback, which was really cool. And I, with 20 other sopranos, that sounded exactly the same. We all exactly the same. Like, I can't express that enough. And we were all like, how are they going to pick who gets this gig and who doesn't? Because we all sound identical. And it literally came down to the science. It literally came down to which vocal color is going to fit with the group we already have in place. And so based on that, and like also like, are you exactly in the center of the pitch, or are you ever so slightly above or ever so slightly below? Or did you have a cold the week prior and you still have a little post-nasal drip, so you're not doing the best today? Or are you nervous, so you're a little bit shaky right now? Like, it literally, like, man, auditions are crazy, man. Auditions
They are.
like, especially when you're like talking about like the music stuff behind the auditions, because there's literally so much that goes into it. And I feel like we could do a whole other like session on like what goes into specifically auditions.
Yeah.
But let's get back on track. Okay. How do you collaborate? I just went right into it. How do you collaborate with the director and the choreographer to ensure a cohesive performance?
Yes. So this is an art within itself because
Yeah,
every show's needs are very different.
Yes.
There is a big difference doing a standard book musical from, say, the 50s, 60s, 70s versus doing like a Les Miserables, a Phantom of the Opera, a sung-through show from the mega musical era,
Cool, yeah.
right? So not only the music demand's greater, but it means that the function of that music is different. So the first thing that I will need to do before I even meet with the team is understand how intense is the score of this show.
Yeah.
How dependent is the scene work and the choreography on aspects of the music. The choreography usually is self-explanatory, right? You dance to the music, so the music has to be there. So you have to get on the same page of what's in the music. The scene work is very different, right? Because there's all sorts of ways to approach music in scenes. You can stop the music and have your scene. You can have a vamp, which means you have a certain amount of music that the orchestra is just repeating until you're at the end of your scene, and then you move on. You can have hits and pauses. You can have your music interact with the dialogue. There's so many possibilities that go on there.
Yeah.
So understanding what the relationship between all of the stage action and the music is the starting point.
Okay.
From there, working closely with the director and choreographer becomes really important.
Yeah.
For example, the team for Seussical just met last night to go over Act 2 because the director and choreographer tried to meet with that and try to go over it, and they went, we have no idea what's going on. And the reason why is that the second act of Seussical the music becomes essentially part of the scenes in almost every scene. So it has accent hits on certain parts, has pauses, has timing of dialogue. The director and choreographer are used to working with the libretto book that just has the text and when music cues start. They're not going to see, hey, there's 2 bars of music here in between this sentence and this sentence. So they're like playing the track and then dialogue happens and they're like, what does all this fit into?
That's nuts.
So that's where I have to become the translator and say, okay, here's what the score says. It's spacing the lines like this. We have this amount of time for this line. This is a choreography break. Then we have a spoken line. Then we have more choreography. So I have to be able to interpolate all of this information, get the whole picture so that I can instruct, okay, here's timing wise what's going on. Whereas if I were doing something like anything goes, the dialogue is always going to stop for the songs. We're going to have much more siloed roles by nature in that, which I would still try to counteract by saying, okay, you know, this is part of a scene. I should understand the scene that leads up to this, what the song means in context of the scene, so that when I'm working with the singers, we can be making smart decisions about things like optional notes, about text interpretation, etc., so that we can fit into the body of that. So depending on your show, right, you have to be very adaptable and say, given the context we're in here, do I need to be more collaborative or do I need to be adequately collaborative?
Yeah.
Because you still want to be collaborating, but sometimes like some shows just work themselves out.
Yeah.
And like you have a lot of production teams who are very used to the music director just being at the piano and making the music happen. Exactly. And just like not even knowing that they need to have a production meeting with them. So sometimes the director and choreographer come to you with like, oh, we need your help for a show like Seussical, for a show like Les Miserables.
Oh yeah.
You know, those things
like
where, where it's really big, it's constantly moving. There's a lot of interplay. There's a lot of timing. There's a lot of nuance and complexity. So you just have to read the room and be ready to express what's needed in order to keep everything on track.
That makes perfect sense. Well, and especially I think that applies even more if you have like a director and a choreographer who don't read music. And also you need to know that the director and the choreographer don't have the same information that the music director has, because you have this big old like score that has like all of the music. Does it have the lines?
Most of the time it does. Their mileage may vary on that. It really depends on how they've it really depends on how the show is structured.
Okay.
So Seussical has most of the lines in there, but even yesterday we discovered there were some that weren't in the conductor's score. So we had to coordinate. Side note, music is crazy. I talked about the super large team needed to put these Broadway shows together. Now imagine getting in all that information and licensing it and putting it out to the public. Like, you're gonna find errors. You're gonna find inconsistencies. It's part of the process.
Can we talk about the score for You're Gonna Love Tomorrow?
So for anyone who may listen to this who's not familiar with what this is, You're Gonna Love Tomorrow is essentially what MTI put together from a concert of Sondheim works that was put on the Whitney Museum of Art in 1986. So it's not a real show. It's a concert. And so they just kind of stuck all these manuscripts together, and it's scans of handwritten notes.
We're going through this trying to read it, and we were like, how? Why? No.
It's borderline illegible.
Yeah, like
so
it was like it's like if I were to take my chicken, script them down, pass them out to an entire ensemble, and be like, please read what I have written. It looks like a second grader did this. Thank you.
Right, and you will find horror stories of like music assistants on Broadway, like, boom, new song added. We need to have it published for the band tomorrow. They'll stay up all night trying to put it through music publishing software. But once upon a time, you had to handwrite all that stuff. You had to handwrite your piano conductor score. You had to handwrite your instrumental parts.
Really makes sense.
And you had to handwrite your vocal parts so that everybody knew what those things were. So back in that day, in the 80s, most of the stuff was handwritten, and it was a significant time investment to get that typeset in an actual program. So yeah, you would get a lot of this handwritten stuff, and some people have great music notation handwriting, and some people don't.
Whoever wrote You're Gonna Love Tomorrow does not. Are you staring them down? You're like, it's you. I know it's you.
I have emotions around this topic because all I want to do is play the score, and if that's hard for me to do, I have emotions.
Yeah. It literally, there was like places, and first of all, this is Sondheim. So like, can we talk about Sondheim for a second?
Never easy.
Alan doesn't want to talk about Sondheim. It looks like Alan is like, don't bring me back.
Yeah, no. The thing about, so Sondheim's whole deal is that he wanted to elevate the musical quality of Broadway. He was used to the likes of Stephen Schwartz and the pop musicals of the 60s and 70s, where it was very flashy pop music. It wasn't complex, it wasn't high intellectual, and he wanted to turn that on its head. So he was a very strongly educated classical musician. He was a prodigy of the contemporary composer Milton Babbitt, which was known for his atonal 12-tone work, his very complex, very mathematical realm of music. So Sondheim took all of that in, and that's how he approaches his musical scores. Very intellectual, very regimented, very thought out.
Oh, yeah.
So every note is placed there for a reason, and if you can't tell which note is placed there, you're gonna have a hard time.
Yeah, it's real hard. Some of the places in You're Gonna Love Tomorrow, like the piano part was just like a black smudge because there were so many notes written, but it was written in somebody's handwriting real terribly. And it was just like a smudge. And we were like, okay, well, where does this live? What notes are these? Like, I literally can't see this right now. And Alan's sitting over here trying to play an entire Sondheim score on the keyboard that's handwritten. Oh my gosh.
It was a rough time.
It was a rough time. So
We made it.
we made it. Moral of the story also, like just for all of you newbie auditioners, do not bring Sondheim into the audition room unless specifically requested.
Or you bring a pianist who knows it and you've worked with.
Yeah, 100% yes.
Between the difficulty of the piano, the timing of the piano,
Yeah.
all of that, just best to bring something a little simpler.
Yeah, we could also go into a whole rant about that right now, but
We
like
could.
we need to stay on topic and then we'll talk again later because there's more time for many more fancy coffee Fridays.
Absolutely.
Okay. Oh my gosh. Let's see. Ooh. What role does the music director play during rehearsals compared to during the actual performances?
So ignoring all the complexities of the production that I went over earlier, when we're working at this level with community theater or regional theater, the music director tends to play all parts and wear all hats in the music team.
Yeah.
So you'll see me, for example, at the piano, rehearsing the singers, working with the director and music director to time everything out, put the show together in rehearsals, and be that air traffic controller. And then by performance time, if you have a piano or you have a live orchestra, you're usually the same one who is conducting that, or playing piano and conducting that, or just playing piano as we did for You're Gonna Love Tomorrow. Depending on your production level, that's going to be a little bit different.
You'll see Alan like playing the piano and conducting with his head sometimes.
Yes, if that's what you do for a living, get a good chiropractor.
Yeah.
Because if you do it wrong, and I noticed this when I was doing that show, if you do it wrong,
Did you do it wrong?
a little bit,
Get it together.
you would get a little bit of whiplash. Your neck would be a little stiff. Like,
Gosh.
yeah. So
Alan.
there's like a science to like bobbing the head, finding out what your big cues are. Just like, okay, we all need to come in together and we're spread across like 20 square feet. It has to be a big old. It's like mostly up and down or like a head bob kind of thing. Just get the groove communicated. It's a fun thing to do.
Little chicken head.
Yeah, and everybody has their own little way of doing it. So whatever you're comfortable with, whatever communicates with the band, it's a fun thing to put together in rehearsal and then into Sitzprobe as well. Just like how do you coordinate all those pieces? Some of it is just everyone being in agreement of what that timing is, so that you are ready for what the next thing is. I've had some shows where I've managed to cue things with very small gestures because the band just knew what was coming. We had rehearsed enough, they got the groove, they're well prepared, so we just go, right?
Yeah, that's awesome.
So then when we get to performance, we're often that piano conductor or that conductor if we're so luxurious to have an orchestra. I've had the opportunity to do a few times. It's kind of fun. But yeah, so in that hybrid, the regional level and the community level, we're pretty much there all the time, just transitioning from rehearsal process to performance process. And if you have a longer run, you're still going to be there to help with the singers if something is getting a little rough, if something's getting out of practice, if there's timing issues, if there's pitch issues, if there's learned note issues, like we're still always there in the process for that. With some longer runs and with some more upscale production companies, you'll see the music director focus on things like just conducting the performance, where you would have a vocal director who would go over the parts, or you'd have an assistant conductor who might also step in and conduct some of the performances. So yeah, it's a very organically done, and it really depends on your resources, the length of the production, and your intent of your music team.
Yeah. Now, what happens in a show like what we're doing where we have tracks?
Well, I'm probably going to be the button pusher is what's going to happen. So if you're working with tracks that a lot of production companies like MTI or Samuel French are able to provide you, That's great news if you're not a strong piano player or you don't have the resources for an orchestra when you really like one. Because, for example, Seussical has so much going on in the orchestration with all these sound effects, with all of these really fun orchestrations. So it can be really hard to do an adequate job on the score of the show if you only have 2 or 3 musicians available to you. So the tracks make it really accessible to be able to put on a nice, high-quality sounding production without having to spend all that money trying to hire all these people, trying to find all these people.
We're on a budget.
Right, trying to rehearse all these people. But then what that leads to is there are a few ways that even the track programming could run.
Yeah.
Traditionally, and I'm much more used to working with tracks earlier in my career because that was like mid 2010s, early 2010s. Even in high school, I was getting started with leading and music directing. The track situation was very different. They can do a few things with tracks. Your pauses and your fermatas can either be pre-timed, which means you have to fit the constraints of your track.
Yeah.
Or what started happening lately, which is really cool, is they've built softwares around you being able to be your own conductor of the tracks. So they will actually be able to say, hey, if this is a fermata, we're going to hold, and it's going to be basically a MIDI interface, so a musical instrument digital interface, which means you're working with programming instruments and not a recorded sound. So it'll be able to read information like how long should this note be? How fast should this note be? How hard should the attack on this note be? All that fun stuff that goes into playing, it'll be able to give an approximation. So from there, from there you can kind of manipulate the information and say, okay, so we know we're going to wait to go on, and then you get the option to go on. Your fermata is over. You're done holding the note. You can go on to the next bit. This pause is going to be this long. Or keep vamping until you say it's time to move out of it. So you need to vamp 5 times. 6 performance. You can say, hey, I'm ready to move out of the vamp performance. And the technology has been able to keep. Yes, you can. It's kind of cool.
What? That sounds so cool.
We'll talk about computer.
Yeah.
So technology is really getting to a point where you can do some really cool stuff without the budget to get a whole orchestra together. So when we have tracks, there's a lot of flexibility. Everyone does everything slightly differently between the different music publishers, but they're after the same goal, right? Take the friction out of, we don't have an orchestra, but we have to figure out how to time all of this stuff in the dialogue and in the scenes.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So just backtracking a wee bit and going into talking about having a long rehearsal and performance process, how do you as a music director help the cast maintain their vocal health?
Yes. So vocal health's a big thing. Everybody talks about it. Something that's really interesting about conducting that I got from my conducting teachers at Westminster Choir College, my alma mater for music, was that instrumentalists don't need to be told how to play their instruments. Singers kind of do.
Yeah.
And this is a really difficult area because singers, being the physical embodiment of their instruments, it's personal. It's very personal. And it's easy to be very sensitive about things. And that is fine to have that connection. It's what makes a singer a singer. So where the difficulty becomes is, how do you communicate that? How do you help a singer with their vocal health and their instrument throughout the process? So one of the things I do is, as much as possible, I make sure that we're doing a warm-up for every single music rehearsal when we have a large group. I encourage anybody who's a lead or a principal or a supporting who has a lot of solo time to explore their own warm-ups before they get to rehearsal if possible.
Now to interject, what kinds of warm-ups do you do?
Great. So this is really going into that voice coaching territory, and I love that. Every singer loves to start with like their lip buzzes and their breath stuff, but I like to start earlier than that. Singing is an athletic endeavor in my philosophy. So the body is important. So every lesson, every private lesson I do with a student or every warm-up I do with a cast, it's a stretch first. It's always a stretch. It's going to focus on the whole body in certain ways, but primarily on your mid-body, your rib cage. That's all muscles you use in singing. Releasing your shoulder tension. That's something
like
that
the neck one?
Yeah, we do it next to the side.
Oh, mine is like tight right now. I'm going to stretch that. Oh, this side specifically.
I know, right? Well, that's a big one for a lot of people, right?
So bad.
Especially if you're the kind of person who's doing community theater but has a desk job, your shoulders, your side neck, it's going to be a huge problem to work through. I also do a lot of actual face massage. So working your mandible, this is responsible for your jaw, working your tongue underneath so that you can keep that relaxed, working all of these side bands and support muscles in your neck, which might like to try to get involved if you're not careful. And then I will actually do laryngeal massages with most of my students.
Do you do the one where you like go side to side and you pop it.
Oh yeah, so hopefully it's not popping, right?
Well, mine doesn't anymore.
Good, yes.
It used to.
The clicky poppy. So what we're talking about here
I
is
hate it so much.
what we're talking about here is that your larynx itself, right? You can kind of find it
Popped once.
if you're giving yourself a little neck massage on that actual tube that is the trachea or the esophagus, and you find that wider part. That's where your larynx actually lives. It's kind of like just behind and under the Adam's apple a little bit. And then all the muscles there have a tendency of getting tight in people who are not used to like working on them. So if you were to take that spot, be nice and relaxed with it, and just about a centimeter distance, just open that, push that to one side, your left or right, you're immediately going to want to like relax everything and drop your jaw and feel very open. If you get clicks while doing that, it's a sign that there's some tension going on that might be getting in the way of your singing. So hopefully when we've done that massage process right and let something go there, you're able to move that ever so slightly without getting a resistance or a click or a pop. So all of that body work is where I start. And then I get into things like doing a lip buzz, which is great for making vibrations all throughout the vocal area, helping massage everything. It makes it sound nice and light, so you're not looking for anything early on. And it helps your breath move, because if you lose that buzz, something's locking up, the breath isn't moving. Something like that's important, right? So I start with the body, work towards the breath, and then the more intellectual things like how's your intonation? Are you able to transition some of these higher registers well? You know, we do something light like that for like 10 to 15 minutes before every ensemble rehearsal so that we can all be on the same page. And then we'll be able to do that work. Generally, to make the best use of our time, we don't generally do a group warm down, but I recommend anyone who has intense singing to do for anything.
I was about to ask about that,
Taking a warm down, you can do this on your drive home. I usually recommend people to do something like a 5-note down, just the sound lu or low, because the L is going to help relax the tongue. The U vowel is going to lighten your voice. And then you just take that from middle range down and it just relaxes everything after what you've done. You can do some additional laryngeal massages. You can do some things that actually do a little bit of popping of like air pressure behind the voice, things like blub, blub, or glub, glub. Those just help relax everything that's been holding into place and trying to be intense, and then just blah, 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 let it go, right? All those little things are just great for making sure that none of that tension you've kept gets held in place when you finish your rehearsal or finish your voice lesson or finish your performance.
I love that. One of the things that I like to say to my students too is that doing like the lip bubbles, like the and humming, or like something on an NG sound is going to be so good for keeping your voice like healthy, because it is an exercise that you can do as much as you want. It is not going to do any sort of damage. It's literally like a happy little, like just like a little spa day for your voice. And so like those I always put in like the warm ups and the warm downs, because like it's just going to make your voice super happy.
Absolutely.
Super happy, healthy. And also, while you're doing that, you're basically taking your voice to the gym.
Yes.
Because your voice is like, it's muscles. It's all these teeny tiny little muscles, and you have to like strengthen them. And if you're not like, you don't have the strength to go through that rehearsal and performance process, well, that's going to be a problem. And that's where hoarseness is going to come in, and you're going to lose your voice, and you're not going to be able to do all the shows you need to do. And so like doing the little things every single day is basically like going to the gym and like working on the small muscles every single day, not the big muscles, not the vanity muscles, but the small muscles that are functional. It's like, it's kind of physical therapy. It's like that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like if you were to go to PT every day for your throat, that's what it is. And so you're strengthening those muscles to keep the longevity going, which I think is great.
Awesome. Yeah, absolutely. Another aspect to that too, beyond just the warm up and the warm down, is I'm going to want to try to prioritize what we need to work on most, right? It might be about timing the music to the scene work. I don't need you to sing as possible. If you're doing something that's demanding over and over again, I will at some point let you know that you can mark it, which means you don't have to do it to your full performance level. You can let the high notes be light. You can skip the high notes altogether, option down. You can do all sorts of things so that you're not pushing your extremes the whole way through like a 2-hour rehearsal process, right? If you were to be singing your highest note over and over for even like half an hour at a time,
like too much.
You're going to get tired. So sometimes in the rehearsal room, we can have you relax on the voice. We can have you take it easy and mark the part. So that we can focus on other aspects that we're trying to sort out. So knowing when to sing full out and when not to is another great tactic for getting through a rehearsal process.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. I want to talk so much more about this, but I also don't want to like go over time. So I'm going to give you my last question.
Okay.
What advice would you give to aspiring music directors looking to break into theater?
So I'm actually going to give the advice of, if you are looking to break into music directing for theater, it's about who you know and just asking.
Send us a DM.
Truly.
Like, I'm
Talk
not
to
kidding
us.
you.
Like, we can always use more people on rotation. I'm like the one right now.
He is.
So I would love the opportunity for, if I want to take a break for a show, I have that option. But I mean that in all earnesty, because music directing for theater is not often a primary career path. And people don't often think about it. They pull a lot of people from the classical world of piano or conducting in order to do this sort of thing. And specializing in this is a newer phenomenon. And so it's hard to find the opportunities because people don't know that you need to look for them, right? So you have to kind of insert yourself in there, talk to people you know who are working on shows, express your interest, express your skill set, right? So you want to have the skill set. Every music director at the beginning level needs to have decent piano skills at the very least. You need to at least be able to plunk harmonies, play harmonies together, and be able to give a passable accompaniment. That's like baseline for this level. To some extent, it's nice to have a pianist to work alongside, but often you don't get the budget for it. So having that skill is really a good start. Being able to connect those people for those opportunities, and being willing to be both creative and logical is really helpful here. The music director is the ultimate blend of, I am a creative who has creative skills, while needing to also be logical. A lot of organizing to do. You need to time out all your stuff. There's a lot of practical, logical book homework that gets done as a music director. So if you combine those skills together and get networked in, you're looking to get to a professional caliber. I got all of my music directing gigs when I was doing this full time through Facebook. Really? I would sub in for people who needed somebody to take over a gig for them. I was in a Facebook group, it was just called Theater Music Directors, and you can find it still, where they would just coordinate on music theater knowledge. They would coordinate on, I need a sub, I need somebody to do this gig, I know somebody who's hiring for a gig. So it's great. You can just word of mouth network your way into this career if that's what you want to do.
Great.
It's super cool that way. And that's how I started working with you. I just told somebody that I do music directing, and your friend Susan said, hey, Haley needs a music director. Like, there was no open job posting anywhere. I couldn't just go to LinkedIn and get onto the job. I just had to be in the network, in the know with people. And a lot of performers do music directing too. I performed at that ATX Music Theater Collective event. That's how I met Susan Taylor Johnson. That's how I got networked. So if you're also a singer or you're a pianist, go do the thing and talk to people. That's going to be your greatest in order to keep doing this career.
That is great. I love that. So send us a DM, go find spaces on Facebook to go like market yourself and network yourself, meet a ton of people. If like seriously, like if you send us a DM and you want to meet a ton of people, I'll just connect you with people. But you are awesome. You guys are amazing. Thank you so much for tuning in today. This was a wonderful Fancy Coffee Friday. And we'll see you again for our next guest next week. And we'll probably have Alan on again because we have like so much. Like we could go on tangents for like many hours.
I feel like we're getting geared up to start a podcast is what's about to happen.
I honestly think we are. Like maybe this turns into a pod. I don't know. Like we'll see. This is new. We'll see what happens with it. Watch, this episode gets turned into a podcast. You're going to be contemplating. We'll see what happens. I don't know. All right. Well, thank you so much for tuning in, you guys. Have a great day.